one review. Book one was about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a writing coach, no other than Mr. Mark Hernandez.
Hello there. Welcome.
Welcome, Mr. Mark Hernandez on Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yes, I am a writing coach. I spent 25 years as an English teacher in Palo Alto, and I moved on to be a private coach. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. I went to school to Stanford. I graduated with a BA in English, and I went to go teach, and then I came back, and I got a JD from Stanford as well, and then I returned to teaching, and then I'm now a writing coach.
Impressive, Mr. Mark, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about college essay
Yeah,
game theory.
yeah.
So, why is it a game theory is the perfect analogy for the college admission essay? What are the core dynamics that reveal that the other metaphors like telling your story or might miss?
And
Mhm.
so, yeah, the game theory behind it is that there is tactics. And I have spent many years as a sports coach. I've coached baseball, I've coached swimming, I've coached water polo. And in all of those things, in every sort of competitive endeavor, you have to get a scouting report, you have to know the competitors, and you have to know the arena, and you have to know the rules. And where that comes into play for college essays is, it is very much a numbers game, and there are way more applicants than there are spots in the competitive universities. And so the key for us is, how do we make ourselves stand out? And so there is some science and some art into making yourself stand out, and that's the game. The game is, how can we get ourselves to be remembered for at least a few seconds after they finish reading our essay.
In this game, who are the key players? The
Yeah.
student, the admission officer, perhaps even the parents or the counselors. What are the primarily and sometimes conflicting objectives?
That's a great call. That's certainly a great call. And I will say, first of all, the admissions officers have a really tough gig. They have a really tough gig because there's so many wonderful and qualified applicants. And clearly, if it were up to the admissions officers, they'd admit a lot more students. But they've got some really hard numbers that they've got to deal with. There are a lot of competitive factors and a lot of, as you say, competing factors. So certainly, the admissions officers are part of it, and they've got a really tough gig. And that, of course, remembering how difficult their job is part of the central nature of writing a good college essay. Is you have to remember that they've got tremendous time pressure and tremendous just workload, and so we have to make something that's going to appeal to them. And as you say, yes, the students are absolutely the key players. And also, yeah, what's tough for them is sometimes they're getting conflicting bits of advice from different sources. And listen, I'm a parent, and so I can tell you that I know that parents just want the best for their kids, and they want to do everything they can for them. And sometimes the kids trying to please the parents is certainly part of the dynamic here. But the key is to make sure that the best way to write your essay is to be as genuine as possible and to be yourself.
And to be yourself for sure, authentic indeed. In the game theory, every move aims for an optional playoff.
Yeah.
For the student, is the ultimate playoff is simply admission. Is there strategic benefit in crafting an essay that is also authentic regardless of outcome?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, because again, there is some art and some science to it, right? And the science is, we have to capture the attention. And so one of the things I talk about my students a lot is, we have to get that first sentence. And first of all, it's got to be correct. I mean, many students whose essays I read when they first come to me, they've got mistakes in the first line. And step one is we have to get that first sentence just absolutely correct and totally free of errors. And then it becomes an issue of the science is, can we get them, what can we do to get them, the readers, to read the second sentence? Because once we can get them to read the second sentence, we're now got some momentum going, and we want to create this reading experience that is just as peaceful and as stress-free and enjoyable as possible. And that's what I get into again. It's where you have to balance, like, the science of attention and the authenticity of yourself. Is you want to tell your story in your voice, but you have to do so in a way that is easy to read and easy to follow.
Easy to read and easy to follow for sure, but the students are told to be authentic, but they also know they're being judged. How does game theory help navigate the tension between a genuine self representation and strategic self presentation?
That's a great call. And as you speak, you say it, there is this pervasive fear that, of being judged, as you say. And so that's where there actually is a real advantage to being authentic, because what happens so often, and I was also, when I was teaching, I would read my students' college essays and help them as part of our classwork. I also work as a professional consultant for 7 years. And what you see when you read a lot of essays in one span of time, what you realize is that sometimes that fear of being judged comes through in the writing. And what happens is that students end up writing things that sound desperate, and they sound insecure, and they sound thirsty. And it's actually the answer to being judged is just write like you don't care. Because when you write like you care, then all of a sudden it becomes more robotic, authentic, and sort of easy to spot as being unconfident. But when you show true confidence and you show not at all fear of judgment, that's when the real stuff comes out. That's when the real effective essays get written.
Interesting, Mr. Mark. And a court tenant is anticipating the admission officer's perspective.
Yeah.
What are the most common moves or thought process of a reader that strategic writers should anticipate?
Yeah. So the first thing is, and this is where a lot of students get in trouble. It's a really good question that you ask, because where students get in trouble is they seem to think that what they're writing is clearer than it actually is, because it makes sense in their head. But then B, they also seem to vastly overestimate how much time the readers have to get through this. And the reality is that in the very competitive colleges, I've heard reports of anywhere from 4 to 10 minutes for the whole application, and that's certainly a lot less for the actual essay. So if you are, one of the things you need to anticipate from the reader is you anticipate that they've got very little time to get through this. And again, they've also got hundreds of these, thousands of these applications to go through. So you do want to make sure you stand out and say stuff that sounds, authentic and original. But also, you have to make it readable, because I tell the students a lot that these people, these readers, they work really hard. And admissions officers, working in admissions offices is very difficult. And especially, a lot of admissions offices are cutting back on staff, and that just means even more work for everyone who's still there. And it's a real tough gig getting through all this stuff. And so you have to anticipate for the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is that your application is getting read at like 3 in the morning, and it's being read by someone who's very overworked and tired and just has read hundreds of these things before and just wants to finish up and go home. And if you give them a reason to be grumpy, they plausibly could take it. And so we have to write with that mindset. We have to write with empathy and an understanding of what the reader's going through.
And Mr. Mark, tell us, the essay is a chance to stand out, but straying too far from the expectation is risky. How do you calculate the optimal point of differentiation with the game?
Yeah, that's a great call. That's a good, really good point. That uh, there are ways to go too far afield and get the reader lost, because there is value in some degree of familiarity. And so I will tell you that one of the things I work on with my students is there's a way to tell stories originally and still follow some decent order and structure. I'm not sure if you or your viewers are familiar with the film Pacific Rim. You ever seen that movie, Pacific Rim?
Yes.
Okay, I think Pacific Rim is a wonderful, wonderful film. I think it's one of the best films of the 21st century.
Yes.
And part of that, I mean, what I admire so much about it is that is like there's an incredible analogy to college essays, because it is a very basic and very unoriginal arc, but it's told with such heart and originality, and is clearly the voice and the vision of Guillermo del Toro. And so that's why I tell the students, like, the idea is like 5% of your work, but then your voice and your approach, that's the other 95.
Mr. Mark, will you be my guest on Movie 101 Review, and let's talk about the Pacific Rim?
Oh, absolutely. Dude, I love it. It's so good. I love it. It's so brilliant.
Yes.
Like, that was incredible.
Yes, please do come over. Movie
good.
101 Review. So, with one of the main essay going to a multiple school, how does a player, what is strategize for a broad audience versus tailoring to move for a single opponent?
Yeah, that's a great call too. And that's where there's value. And again, there's value in staying authentic for that one. And there's also, most schools have multiple supplements that are specific to those schools. And so you will have an opportunity to write specifically and tailor a specific message for each individual school. And that is in itself a different challenge. But there too, you want to make sure that you are crisp with your writing and that you use your voice well. But yeah, as far as the main essay goes, again, there's danger in trying to, as you say, to try to tailor your message too much for the reader. And that's where, again, just want to just tell a story that you think will be interesting and fun. And I'll also say, and this is the big thing I tell students also, is that there's just so much value in being able to read your essay out loud, because that's the big thing, is that what you want your story to read as a story that you're telling to somebody that you just met. And if you can find, if you can use your words and syntax and punctuation to make it sound like you, then you're almost all the way there.
Word count is the scarce resource. What are the strategic principles of allocating words between showing and telling, between the narrative and reflection?
That's a great call. That's a real great call. And as you say, what most students don't really get until it's too late is how quickly 650 words goes by. And as you say, like, I think the best way to do it, my advice is, and it sounds, it's not, I didn't come up with this, but you want to show, not tell. And what you want is, you want the narrative to be clear enough and easy to understand enough that the reader will pick up most of the implications before they get to the reflections. So I usually tell my students the reflections should be maybe 1 or 2 sentences maximum, because after that, it starts getting redundant. And it also, if you need more than that, then the story has to be clear to begin with.
Vulnerability calculation, Mr. Mark. Sharing struggle can be powerful, but it's risky.
Yeah.
How does it strategically calculate risk reward of revealing vulnerability?
This is another, man, you have a lot of good questions, man. This is great. And so the trauma dump is a very, like this probably the first, probably the most common or second most common question I get is about the trauma dump. is about laying out all of any number of tragedies that have befallen a student, and so on and so forth. And my general advice, I can usually boil down to one sentence, and that is, if the essay makes the reader admire you, it can work. Semicolon. If the essay makes the reader pity you, it won't. Because again, this gets back to the numbers part of it. What I think students forget is, and I say this with like a lot of people struggle and a lot of people have hard times, and we all do, right? As dare I say, Mr. Rogers would say, there's no adult life, no normal human life that is free from pain. So we all go through pain, and where I think people get in trouble is they seem to think that no one else goes through pain, and that when they express their pain, express their trauma, like they'll become special. But again, the numbers say that admissions officers see a lot, and it takes a lot to really stand out as far as hardship goes. And in any event, the readers aren't looking for someone who's gone through the worst. They want heroes. They want people who've struggled and fought through and overcome.
Very well said, Mr. Mark. Very well said indeed. The line between strategy and manufacture.
Yeah.
When does smart audience aware editing across the line into a creating strategic fiction? Where do you draw the ethical boundary?
Yeah, it's a great call. And certainly, and this is why I do think, especially with that, and also with the proliferation of AI, I do think that the college essay game is going to change radically within the next few years. I do think that there are big changes up ahead. But yeah, I mean, listen, my basic ethical boundary is like I can make suggestions, but the story is the students. And I'm not one to put words in mouths. I'm not one to rewrite stuff for them. I can point out where I think structure could be more improved. I think I can make spitball with them. I love spitball on ideas and tactics and stuff like that. But like where it crosses the line is when you start writing things for them. You start putting things in your words, not the students. And while we're at it, the tough part there is for that sort of behavior, it's counterproductive, because then all of a sudden you've got some sections that sound like the student and then some sections that sound like the person helping. And then sometimes those voices don't mesh very well. And then it either becomes clear to the reader what's happened, or it's not clear what's happened, and it's not a very good essay anyway.
How does the involvement of paid counselors or eager teacher change the game's dynamics, Mr. Mark? Does it create an arms race?
Yeah, this is a great call. And I think to a certain extent it does. I mean, it is tough out there. And I do think, this is my first year as a professional in this field. And what I've been learning is that more and more people than I even thought are working with professional consultants. And many of them are working with consultants from as early as eighth grade. And it's certainly, listen, there are critiques of the system, and there are certainly some inequities, and it's tough. It is a tough one. I will tell you that, like, for what it's worth, I've tried to make any number of services available to every potential budget and income level. I'll say that, because it's hard. It's hard. Like there's definitely some degree of an arms race going on for sure.
Mr. Mark is winning the game with the highly strategic but less authentic essays, a pretty victory if it places a student in a college that is not true fit.
That's also a great call. Yeah. And I do think, again, like that's why it's so important, as I said earlier, that's why it's so important for the the coach or the consultant or whoever's helping to let the essay be a pure reflection of who the student is. Because as you say, like, and I tell the students this a lot, like, if you get somewhere by fraudulent means, it'll catch up to you, right? You will get exposed at some point. And so I do think that's why it's so important for the helper, the coach, the consultant to make sure that there is guidance, but not manipulation.
The revision process is central, Mr. Mark. How is each draft is not just improvement, but a strategic recalibration based on the feedback from
Yeah, it's a
readers.
good point. And what's interesting to me so often is when I work with students, they, how should I say this? And then again, I taught film lit for 20 years, so I am like very familiar with, and I focus a lot on my class, story structure and film structure and screenplay structure. And what becomes clear when you work with some students is they don't have a real good grasp on story structure, and so much of their vision is actually saying, I know how this sounds in your head, but here's how it sounds to somebody who's never even been, like, here's how it sounds to somebody who wasn't there in the moment you're describing. And here's where I think there's a lot more drama. And I will tell you, I was working with a student who uh, you know had almost in passing made a reference to the fact that she organized a fashion show for disabled children and children with disabilities. And as I was reading the essay, I was struck. And then when we met about it, I go, wait a second, hold on. Like, tell me more about this. Tell me more about the story of you organizing this fashion show for children with disabilities. And she's like, oh, she told me it was like 5 minute story about it. And I go, hold on, you need to write about that, because that's the real entertaining, that's the real engaging part of the story. The rest of it's okay, but the real story is somewhere that you didn't even realize.
Mr. Mark, beyond admission, how do strategic thinking skills honed by this game theory approach benefit a student long after decisions are
Yeah.
made in college and their career?
Another great question. Uh, so it really is, listen, the ability to communicate clearly and efficiently benefits you everywhere you go. I mean, being able to engage a reader, keep their attention, respect their time, that is going to serve you well as in anywhere in the workplace, right? That is how you can present well, you can communicate well with colleagues, you can write really good emails that, don't waste people's time. You can give good presentations. It's the stuff we work on. The stuff we work on. These are skills that can really apply beyond college.
Mr. Mark, before we wrap up our discussion for
Yeah.
today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, or my other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101, love letters, Movie 101 review, Music 101, fourth season, Science 101, Sex 101, and second season of my baby podcast, Law 101, Mental Health 101, and Bible Verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Mark, would you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yeah. So let's see. If we're talking about nonfiction, I have to say one of my favorite books ever was Titanic: Death and Life of a Legend by Michael Davey. I will say this. I read it on a cruise, and it was a book that I started reading, and about 10 pages in, I was like, hey, wait a second. I like reading, because it's had such a long year of just reading of poorly written essays, and I've been working as a consultant, so I've been reading student work for a lot of it, and then I finally read a professional writer. I'm like, oh right, sentences. Reading is fun, and so I like Titanic, Death and Life of a Legend. As far as novels go, My favorite novel of all time has got to be either The Princess Bride or Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf.
Thank you for that recommended books, Mr. Mark. And if you could give a graduating senior one piece of the game theory advice before they hit submit, what would it be? Is it about move they made or the mindset they cultivate in the process?
Yeah, and the piece of advice I would give them is it's going to be all right. And you've done when you're ready to hit submit, you've done all you can, and there's not much sense in worrying about anything else. And just be ready for anything, and understand it's going to be okay.
It's gonna be okay, people. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Mark. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Absolutely, absolutely. You can follow me on Instagram, and you can follow me on TikTok at English for Mark H. And you can go to my website, EnglishForMarkH.com. So EnglishForMarkH.com, and again, Instagram, TikTok, and at English for Mark H.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Mark Hernandez because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering assay will rise. So, Mr. Mark, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it. Great time here. Thanks.
Mordicon people, see you soon.